Gentleman from California is recognized for his second round of questions. 5 minutes.
Thank you. And I wanted to follow up on the line of questioning that Ms. Lee and I were kind of going back and forth with regard to the kernel. Part of the discussion at the Microsoft Endpoint Security Summit involved reducing reliance on the kernel. My understanding is that Microsoft agreed at the summit to make additional capabilities available at the user level. Do you know the timeline for that process? And do you have a sense of how Microsoft and security vendors will engage to reduce the kernel and more additional activity, to the user space? How would you reduce risk to the kernel and move it to the user space, I guess is the question.
Thank you. I don't have that timeline available. Happy to follow up with you on that. What I will say is that things can crash in user space too. And so this is not unique to the kernel space.
Trade one set of risks for another. Right.
It's there's definitely things that can break in user space as well as in the kernel space. Yes, sir.
The relevant update in this incident only affected, as you've pointed out, Windows systems, but my understanding is that Apple's restrictions on kernel access might have prevented a similar incident from taking place on Mac systems. Do you view Apple's restrictions on kernel access to be beneficial, or do they negatively impact the effectiveness of security software like yours?
We have security products that work on Windows systems, Apple systems, and Linux systems as well. We leverage all of the features of those various operating systems. They have pros and cons for each, and we leverage everything in order to have the most effective security solution for those platforms. The Windows architecture is an open architecture, as I mentioned earlier. Apple has a tighter supply chain, and with Linux, you have to pre-compile the kernel for every possible configuration of hardware that you would want to support. So there's different features of each kernel.
Would you agree, though, that if something crashes in the app space, it's limited in its effect to the app, whereas if something crashes with the kernel in Microsoft, it could crash the whole system?
Yes.
We've got about 2.5 minutes left. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think would be helpful for us to understand? Anything that you wanted to just revisit and further articulate?
I think it's important to note that this is not a cyber attack. This is something that happened within the system during an update process, which we've spent a considerable amount of thought and effort to ensure that this doesn't happen again. My concern is, if I may, these cyber threat actors that we're seeing across the globe. This is something that we need to be paying close attention to. We are seeing the constant evolution of those threat actors looking to subvert systems. They've moved into the identity space, stealing usernames and passwords, and are leveraging identity access to move into new environments and to conduct additional ransomware and data extortion attacks. So this is an area that would like to continue working with the committee on, and anything that we can do to help.
Great. Mr. Chairman, do you have anything you wanted to ask?
No, I'm just saying speed with cybersecurity. We don't work with speed here in Congress,
that's right.
unfortunately.
Yeah, speed, what's that?
Yeah.
You don't recognize that. All right, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.